and welcome to Rain Francis Art. My name is Rain. Today I'm going to show you how to paint this watercolor whale. So let's begin. This is what you'll need for today's watercolor painting. You're going to need some watercolor paper. I'm using a Visual Journal 90-pound watercolor pad, and it's a small one today. It's 5.5 inches by 8 inches, and I've turned it on its side. As for paintbrushes, I've got a number 4 round, a number 2 round, and I've got a number 4 liner. I'm not sure which ones I'm going to use, but I will definitely leave that in the description below. To trace out my whale, I'm going to be using a light blue watercolor pencil. Now this is not necessary. I suggest that you draw out your whale before you start painting it. And you could use a watercolor pencil, you could use a light blue coloring pencil, and if you have to, you can use a graphite pencil. I don't know if you can see it, but I did sketch out my whale with a graphite pencil at first, and what I did was I tried to erase as much of the graphite as possible because I was having a hard time drawing a whale. It's not that obvious sometimes, you know. It looks easy, but once you get it down on paper, depending on your talent, I don't have whale talent, it was hard for me. So I'm going to just retrace that with the blue so that I'll be able to see it very well. As for paints, I like to use these. This is Holbien Artist's Watercolor Paint. It's tube paint. And I'm just letting you know, it is super duper expensive, but it is worth the money. I think I bought this tube 4 years ago, and it's still perfectly fine. I don't remember how much it costs. This is Cobalt Turquoise Light. And I wanted to show you the difference between paints. This is a very high-end quality paint. This is what is called a student's paint. It's the Michaels brand Artist Loft. Now I've got my old watercolor palette here that I actually haven't opened in probably 6 months. On this side here, I have the high quality paints. I've got that nice cobalt blue. I think this is a phthalo blue. There's a Prussian blue in here. And there's a phthalo green, and I think this is a hooker's green in here. These two here on this side, these are the Artist Loft. This is the student grade watercolor paint that comes from a tube. About a half an hour ago, I sprayed all of this with water because they all looked like the white here. They all looked hardened. So I sprayed them all with water, and you can really see the difference. The Artist Loft one, it's still solid. Okay? And it doesn't really give off much paint because it's solid. These all, for lack of a better term, melted, and they're wonderful. This is that, look at how I just mixed that in, and it's perfect to use right now. That's the biggest difference. Besides the vibrance of the colors, that's the biggest difference between the high quality and the student quality. The high quality just lasts a lot longer. So I'm going to be using mostly that cobalt blue today. I think I'm going to use some greens too, but I'm going to decide as I go along. Like I said, I'll put a list in the description below of what I actually used. I've got some paper towels too. So why don't I start? I'm going to outline my whale. First, let me get all this eraser stuff off here. I'm just using an old dollar store paintbrush that I haven't used for painting. It works really well to get all eraser bits and dust off your page. So I'm going to outline my whale. And I hope you'll be able to see this. It's quite light. I'll press down hard. Are you able to see that? I sure hope so. I can't see much right now because of the lighting here. Oh, see, I pressed down too hard and I broke my pencil. Big no-no. I have a kids' art channel, and I'm always preaching to them not to press down too hard because you'll break your pencil. I just did it. I'm trying to press down hard so that you guys can see the outline, but I shouldn't do that. Now the tip is very, very fragile and it keeps breaking. So don't do what I do. Don't press down hard. What is it? Those who teach can't do? I think that's what the saying is, or those who can do can't teach, or I don't know. It's the weekend here in rural New Brunswick, and one of my neighbors has his little grandkids over here, little boys. I think they're probably pre-teens or something like that. And they've decided to bring out the dirt bikes. And it's annoyingly loud, and they're racing up and down the road once in a while, so I'm just warning you ahead of time. That might be in the background, nothing I can do about it. So, oops. I think you guys can probably see this outline. I'm hoping so. But what I'll do is I'll stop the video right now and I'll take a picture of it and I'll turn it into a stencil that I can put a link in the description below for you if you want to download it and transfer the stencil onto your canvas. Okay, so what I'm going to do first is I'm going to take my small number 2 brush, and I've got some water here. I don't know if you can see the water. You see how orange that is? I've just recently shocked my well, which means basically chlorinating the well to try to get the bacteria out of there. And it's still in the process of settling, so all my water is orange from the iron moving all around. Oh boy, I love living in the country, but the water situation is a pain in the butt sometimes. Okay, what I'm doing is I'm applying water inside the tail of the whale. The tail of the whale. And hopefully it won't be orange water. Just all over that tail. This is wet on wet technique, by the way. Water and wet paint. Because watercolor will always follow water. So wherever you put the water, the paint will go. Now I'm not going to hold my palette in my hand like I normally do, because this one's a little difficult to hold. But I'm dipping my, can you see this? I'm dipping my paintbrush into that beautiful turquoise blue, and I'm just going to tap. You see how that works? This is a gorgeous color too. I'm tapping around the edges because I want the edges to be a little bit more dark than the inside of the tail. And the water will just start flowing all over the place. And I've got snoring dogs in the background. All right. And I'm just going to go in and lightly fill in a little bit of this with the blue. All right, I don't want it to be a solid color, but I'm kind of tapping around the edges here because I want everything to be nicely blended. There, I'm going to leave that as is, and I'm going to just clean off my brush, and I've got some paper towel over here. I'm just going to wipe off my brush here. All right, now, here's something I'm going to do with my watercolor pencil. And I said that the watercolor pencil was optional, and it is. if you've got a nice steady hand and a liner brush, you can do what I'm doing. I'm basically going to be drawing in the lines that show up underneath the whale's belly. Okay? You could do this, like I said, you could paint it in, or you can draw it in. Coloring pencil will be fine because we want those lines to show. And I'm going to go till about here. Just kind of let it fade out a little bit. And I might go in later with my liner brush and try to paint those in. I think I'll be able to. I just might have to move my pad around, you know, to try to get a good angle. Because where I am right now, what I do is I have an angle that's more for the viewer. It's hard for me to paint this way, but I'm becoming used to it. All right, so I've got all those lines put in. Just gonna wipe that off. And I'm gonna continue with the whale. I'm gonna do the same thing I did with the tail. I'm gonna put in water and I'm gonna work my way down. I'm not gonna apply water to the entire whale just yet because I don't want my water to dry. And I don't want to have to keep reapplying more and more water because then my paper will start to buckle. So I'm doing a little bit at a time. And I still have some blue on this brush. I don't know if you're going to be able to see it, but there's a light painting of blue there, so I'll know where I stopped. Going back into that turquoise, and I'm going to do the same thing, just tapping. And on this side too, just tapping. And then I'm going to bring some of that color into the middle. Oh, I've got Raven, my dog, is dreaming. You don't need much paint. Okay, and I'm going to continue to do that for the whole top of the whale here. I'll get to the fins and the eye after, but I'm basically using the same technique. Just a little bit of water, wet on wet technique. The wet water first and then the wet paint after. And it's going to look really, really nice. All right, back into that beautiful turquoise. Tapping. And anytime you feel you need more paint on your brush, just go in and grab it. Okay, now I'm going to bring all that color in to the middle. And you see here, there's like a line that I'm not crazy about, so I'm just taking a little bit of water and I'm going to blend that so that you can't see that line. Okay? I can bring up some of that blue up here too. That's what happens when you do sections, you know, sometimes you have lines. All you have to do is blend it in. That's all. The reason why I decided to do a whale today was because I was walking the dogs the other day. Just try to avoid the eye. Put the water around the eye. I was walking the dogs the other day, and I'm a sky watcher. I love to look at the skies and look at nature. And I saw a cloud formation that was really interesting, and it was kind of windy. So when I looked, I was just watching, and all of a sudden I saw a whale in the cloud. And I'll show you the picture here. Isn't that amazing? And within a minute, it was gone. I love seeing shapes in clouds. So I thought to myself, Mother Nature is telling me it's time to draw a whale and paint a whale and do something with whales. So that's why I'm doing this today. Okay. Continuing on, just to finish up this top part here, filling it with water. I've got quite a bit of paint there. I might just pull that in. Yeah, look at that. I kind of want this area to be a little darker though, so I'm going to grab my turquoise and just dab it all in, because I want the top of the mouth to be darker. Okay. Let's clean off my brush there. This is such a simple way of doing a painting, and it always turns out beautifully. Okay, so now I think I'm going to work on, I'm not going to work on the eye just yet, because I'm going to paint that a dark blue color, and I don't want, all of this area here is still wet. I don't want any of that to bleed into the light blue. So I'm going to work on this fin here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to, I've got some, there we go. I'm going to put water on the outside squiggly area here of the fin only. I'm not going to put water on the inside yet, just on the outside. All right, and I'm going to take that same cobalt, turquoise, blue, tap that in. I want to show you, what if I start from the top here? And if I go like this, maybe I won't do that today, but you can lift your page and you're going to watch how the watercolor paint will follow the water trail that you put in. Yeah, I thought it wise not to do that right now. But it's kind of neat to see that. Okay. I've still got some paint on my brush, so I'm just going to kind of put a line here. There we go. Because I want to separate the body from the fin, so there's a nice straight line here. And I may actually put in a little more pigment so that the line shows, at least on the part of the body of the whale. I'm not going to do this area here. Okay, now I've still got some paint on my brush, and what I'm going to do is, my palette's pretty dirty, so I've got this other palette here. It's very clean. I'm going to take some of that blue and just put a little bit on my palette, and I'm going to soak it because I want to have a very light wash of that blue color. Okay, so it's very, very light. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply this very, very thinly across the entire belly of the whale. And I'm going to be careful here because I don't want any of this squiggly dark stuff to bleed into the belly. And I'm trying not to erase those lines that I drew with the watercolor pencil. Because I do want them to show. If they get erased, I'll just go in with my liner pen paintbrush and I'll reapply them, that's all. But they're still there, so I'm happy about that. Okay, that's good enough for me for now. I still may go in after and reapply those lines. So now I'm going to work on this fin here with the same wash. I'm just going to fill in that fin. Wet on dry. If I had made this all wet, there would have been a possibility that all of the dark color around it would have bled into it. So that's why I chose to do the wet on dry for that and for this area here too. Now I'm going to work on this fin here. I'm going to take a little water and fill in that little triangle area with water. I still have some blue paint on my paintbrush, so it's blue. And just around the top edge of the whale's fin here, I'm putting water, and I'm going to dip into my paint and dab that in there. And fill that triangle area. I have a lot of paint on there, or a lot of water, I should say. But you see the wet on wet technique, it's not going to bleed out outside of the whale. Everything is contained where the water is. I want that just a little darker. There we go. Okay. I'm going to wet my brush a little bit just to take off the excess paint. And with that wash that I made, I'm just going to go in wet on dry. And I don't mind if a little bit bleeds out. There we go. Okay, so I've got basically the whale is done. I want to add a little bit of detail though, just a little bit of detail. So I'm going to take some of that Cobalt turquoise here on my brush, and I'm going to just put a little bit around the eye of the whale. Okay. I'm going to wet my brush a little bit and just try to soften that up so that it's not, you know, a huge blob of dark paint. But I'm trying to make the eye stand out a little bit. There we go. I have on this side here, this is a Prussian blue. It's a very dark blue. See how dark that is? I've got some on my brush now, and I'm going to paint the eye. But I'm not going to paint the whole eye. First I'll do the outline. but I'm going to leave a little white spot on the top there. Okay. I'm just dabbing a little water on here, and I'm going to tap around the eye just to make that stand out a little bit. And I don't know if you noticed, but as I was putting it in, it started to bleed out, which is fine. Now I'm just tapping it a little bit more so that it'll blend. Okay. Now let me see. Here I go. I'm going to attempt to recreate those lines. I'm going to attempt. All right, so I've got my liner brush and I've wet it, and I want to show you. You can really turn that into a fine tip. There we go. Very fine tip. Now I'm going to dab that into my turquoise, and I'm going to put that into my wash because I want it to be liquidy enough that it's almost like an ink. Okay, I'm loading that up. And like I said, I'm going to have to move around here, so you might hear my chair moving around because I have to make sure I have a steady hand, which I don't often have. Ooh. Not too bad. Just putting that in there again. Let's see if I can do all of them. Okay, what I'm doing off camera is I'm just, so I don't have to keep moving back and forth, I'm just dipping my liner brush back into that wash. Well, that's a little thick. With the liner brush, actually, you know what? I'm going to be quiet. I can't multitask when I'm doing details. All right, whew. That was a little stressful. All right, I'm just going to wipe off my liner brush here. I was going to say with the liner brush, you don't want to press down very hard on it. So I'm going to take a little bit of that blue, but really add some water to it so it's a wash, and I'm back to my number 2 round. I'm just going down here. And I'm just going to soften up those bottom lines a little bit. And I'm going to put a little bit more paint on my brush. And I'm going to go around the outline of the whale here. Okay, that wasn't too bad. I think I want this fin to be a little darker. I still have some paint on my brush, and I'm just going to put it into that wash and maybe just add some paint there. And I want to thin out that line. So to not thin it out, but I want to blend it a little better. So I've got some water on my brush. And I'm just softening it up a little bit so that it doesn't look like a straight line. And anywhere you need to, where you see straight lines that you don't want, just add water to soften it up. And it works really well. I might soften this up a little bit here too. Okay, that's fine. I like that. Now I have to see if there's anywhere that I want to darken. I think I want to darken a few areas on the tail. So I'm going to, my tail is dry. As long as your watercolor painting is absolutely dry, you can apply layers. Now, I would probably wait maybe an hour for this to dry, but I think I'm going to attempt to do this anyway. I want to put a little darker color. I'm doing wet on wet again, adding a little more dark just around the areas, the outside areas of the whale's tail, and I'm tapping. Okay. And I put some water here too, so I'll tap that in there. And I'm going to soften up the edge here. Just gives it a little darker. And I want to darken up this area too here. Wet on wet. Oh, I put too much paint there. And I'm going to bring that out and soften it. Okay. And I think I'm going to do an area here as well. So a little wet on wet. And apply more of that paint. And I'm going to soften that up as well. Okay, where else can I darken? I'm just going to fix this up a little. There we go. Maybe the belly area here could be a little darker. So I'm just going to put a little wet and tap some of that paint in. And just soften the sides, the edges. Okay. I'm looking for areas that I want to shade in more. So I'm going to do the top of his or her mouth and tap. If you try to do a second layer on a wet page, you'll simply just wash all of your paint away. And you don't want that, so make sure it's dry before you add a second layer. I'm just softening there. And I'm going to go in with this wash that I had previously prepared. And I'm going to make it a little darker under the mouth here, but not really, really dark. Just a little dark, and I'm going to soften that a bit and hopefully not erase my lines there. There we go. I really like that. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to let this dry, and then I'm going to apply some of my favorite thing in the world to do, and that's splatter. A quick way to dry your watercolor or any of your paintings is to take out a hairdryer. You know, that's sort of a way to cheat it a little bit. So what you do, you have to make sure that it's on the cold setting though. Let me just quickly dry my painting, and that way I can apply my splatter right away. That technique works very well. But everything was flying. I don't know if you saw that, all my paper towels flew. Okay, so what am I going to do? I'm going to do some green splatter. Now over here I've got some phthalo green. That's a very vibrant green. And I'm going to take a little bit of water and put it in my palette. And I'm going to take some of that, I'm going to make sure you can see there, some of that phthalo green. Look at how vibrant that color is. Isn't that gorgeous? Okay, I'm going to load up my brush here. And I've just got my pencil and I'm going to apply the splatter. And anytime you have to reload your brush, go ahead. Just tap it. Watch what I'm doing here. I'm reloading my brush and I'm tapping it a couple of times just to get any large droplets off. Reloading, tapping, splattering. Okay, I think I need a little more over here. I always think I need more splatter. I can't get enough of it. Okay, now I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of that really dark Prussian blue and I'm going to splatter with that. So I'm going to do the same thing. Put a little bit of water in my palette. And I'm going to add some of that Prussian blue. It's nice and dark. And I'm going to splatter with that too. I'm going to try to stay near the edge first, just to make sure I like it. Oh yes, I like it. Right, I'm not going to overdo it with that one, but I am going to also splatter with my turquoise. I already have that wash. Oops. I already have that wash in there with the water. I might need more water actually. There we go. And I'm going to splatter with this one too. Right. I think that's it. I'm pretty happy with that. I'm very pleased how my whale turned out. I hope you're pleased too if you followed this tutorial. If you enjoyed yourself, could you please like and subscribe and leave me a comment? I would love to read your comment. And if you want to show me your artwork, I'm on Instagram, so please tag me. And I also have a blog where I do a weekly art date, so check that out. All of the information is in the description below and in the About section of this channel. Thanks again so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!